She doesn't get enough praise. So we want to remind you how important she is, and we put together an 11-minute video. You could sit back and relax and see 4 of the most important hearings. Now, I've done a lot of testimony, but wait till you hear her at these 4 hearings, starting in 1996 to defend democracy in Albania.
It was former Congressman Joseph DioGuardi and the board of the Albanian American Civic League who described to me in vivid detail a Tirana of just a few years ago, in which citizens wearing nearly identical suits moved furtively through the main square, where now a multitude passes and mingles daily. A Tirana in which only government officials were allowed to own cars, where now hundreds of automobiles traverse the streets. A Tirana in which there was almost no commercial activity amid an absolutely threadbare existence, in which now, as I have witnessed, free enterprise is flourishing along with foreign investment. In addition to the fairly extensive academic research that I have conducted in relation to Albania since 1991, I have heard numerous personal accounts from Albanians, from Vlora to Durrës, from Shkodra to Tirana, and in the diaspora, from Titova to New York City, of the barbarous treatment that Albanians suffered for 50 years at the hands of communist dictator Enver Hoxha. I never knew that Albania, the Albania that prior to the collapse of communism had cut off all of its communication with the rest of the world and was quite typically referred to as a prison without walls. However, since 1993, I have met the survivors of the old Albania and made 3 trips there, including a delegation joining with Congressman Gilman, who was en route from Athens to Tirana to discuss Greek-Albanian relations with President Sali Berisha. This was in August of 1995. I know the face of the new Albania, and nothing, including the recent elections, has altered my belief that Albania's movement from the most brutally repressive and centralized communist regime in Europe to a nascent democratic society in the space of only 4 years is an astonishing accomplishment worthy of our respect and, much more important, to our support. For 50 years, there was no consistent or considerable outcry against the ferocious totalitarianism of the Hoxha regime. Where was the world's indignation when Albanians lived on the brink of starvation in a constant state of fear? Since the collapse of that regime 5 years ago, Albania, with minimal support and recognition for making a peaceful transition to a democratic state and for undergoing a thorough restructuring of its economy, has groped into the late 20th century. Why have we been so sparing in our response to this transformation?
Ms. DioGuardi.
I address this body today with the same convictions I had 10 years ago when I decided to devote myself to helping to resolve the Balkan conflict. And that is that the United States shares a moral imperative with the world after the Nazi Holocaust to prevent the resurgence of fascism and ultranationalism in the heart of Europe, and that it is in the vital interests of the United States to further peace and democracy in the context of a united Europe. My position and the position of the Albanian American Civic League is that there will be no lasting peace and stability in the Balkans until the Albanian dimension of the conflict is resolved, and that begins first and foremost with recognizing the independence of Kosovo. Until that happens, I believe that we're going to continue to recycle the failed foreign policy of the past, risking renewed conflict in the region at a time when we can least afford to face it, with a full-blown crisis in the Middle East, the turmoil in Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. My point of departure for evaluating U.S. foreign policy in the Balkans is its impact on the reality that Albanians have faced for 125 years. And that reality is arrest, torture, imprisonment, occupation, ethnic cleansing, forced expulsion, and genocide. This is the reality that's been repeatedly obscured and concealed, first when the great powers carved up Albanian lands after the Balkan Wars, then through 4 decades of communism, finally leading to the rise of Slobodan Milosevic, who we all know rose to power on the backs of Albanians and Bosnians through racism. When all is said and done, the United States and Europe stood and sat by and watched while Milosevic occupied Kosovo, waged 4 wars of aggression in the Balkans, and committed genocide, slaughtering more than 300,000 people, displacing 4 million. And I actually believe the United States never intended to intervene in Kosovo. It was finally forced to in 1 year when the Kosovo Liberation Army rose up to defend the innocent civilians of Kosovo, and our own diplomatic maneuverings failed. I believe that Albanians in post-war Kosovo are back to exactly where they were in 1913, at the mercy of external powers, this time the United States as well as Russia and Europe, and they are wrongly being depicted by Serbia as the principal source of violence in the Balkans and wrongly as a threat to regional stability.
Have with us Shirley DioGuardi. She is a Balkan Affairs Advisor to the Albanian American Civic League, a position she has held since 1995.
Mr. Chairman, in my opinion, it cannot be more timely to have this particular hearing now in your subcommittee, raising questions about the resolution of the Balkan conflict just days after Catherine Ashton, the European Union's High Representative, has proclaimed a successful outcome to 10 rounds of talks between Belgrade and Pristina. If the outcome were genuinely successful, this hearing would not be necessary, but unfortunately, in my opinion, the agreement between Serbian Prime Minister Dačić and Prime Minister Thaci is a quick fix. It does not amount to a comprehensive and effective agreement that will bring lasting peace and stability to the region. In my opinion, this will only happen when Serbia recognizes Kosovo's sovereignty and its admission to international institutions, grants equal civil and human rights to the Albanian majority in the Preševa Valley, on a par, I might add, with the rights that are currently enjoyed by Serbs in Kosovo, relinquishes its parallel structures in northern Kosovo, and focuses on the economic and political development of Serbia. Once that happens, Kosovo's government will need to focus on the establishment of a genuine democracy and rule of law, something that it has failed to do because of its lack of sovereignty and the corruption of many of its government officials. Belgrade's goal has always been to achieve its expansionist aims in Kosovo diplomatically by legalizing the partition of northern Kosovo, just as it achieved its expansionist aims in Bosnia by force, when at the end of the Bosnian War in 1995, it was awarded with the artificially created Republika Srpska. Ever since the war ended in June '99, there's been an effort to destabilize the North.
Well, thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, first of all, on behalf of Chairman Royce and our Foreign Affairs Committee. Allow me to welcome you here today for this timely and important briefing and discussion.
Ileana is one of the leaders in the foreign policy community in the United States and cares deeply about human rights issues, and that's really what we're about here. Because with the exception of the Clinton administration, and they had to be pushed when they dropped NATO's bombs on Serbia, all of our administrations in our lifetime have been taking a backseat to Europe, being involved in a policy of appeasement and containment which does not work. And we always know when we take a backseat to Europe, ultimately because they can't, by virtue of their 28-member nation status, all having divergent views, it doesn't work. Even now we have 5 of those nations who don't recognize the independence of Kosovo. So it's always been the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. It's been Congressman Gilman, Lantos, Biden, Hyde, you, Dana Rohrabacher, quite explicitly, who made it possible, working with us in part, our information, and having more than one hearing over time, that led to peace in the region up to a certain point and the independence of Kosovo. Unfortunately, we are now back to where we kind of all began. We know that the bombs were dropped and it stopped the war finally, Slobodan Milosevic's genocidal march across Europe for a decade. Then, what happens in 2001? Macedonia erupts, and there's a great, fanfare about who was really responsible. It took us a year to convince state and the National Security Council that it wasn't Albanians who actually initiated this. It was actually coming from the ethnic Macedonian Slav ruling party, and we tried to even speak with them to say, don't move this into a military conflict. This can be resolved diplomatically, but unfortunately, no one anywhere was paying attention. But we need a reset button there because there's been too much of an orientation of, let's just have stability. Stability at all costs.
That's terrible.
And it is. And we know now in the 21st century this can no longer work.
No.
Human rights now has to come to the
They have
forefront.
to push upon us.
And what we especially want to do is ask for the United States to now pay attention because we're in danger, and I'll tell you why we're in danger. Macedonia is in line to enter NATO and enter the EU, and I'm very curious about how this can happen given the terrible conditions in which non-ethnic Macedonians are being treated, but also even many ethnic Macedonians, because we have all through the region now a power elite holding on to most of the benefits.
And a
corrupt power elite. And why, oh why, oh why, has the United States and the EU, have Washington and Brussels thought they could look the other way as if nothing, was about to emerge. Thank you for being here. There's no way, to capture the journey of 25 years tonight. As you all know, we just chose some clips from my own personal, testimony before Congress. And you'll see, by the way, 25 years outlined or in highlights in your journal, so I hope you'll spend some time to look at it. But I want us to mention 3 pivotal developments without which we would not be here tonight. The first was Joe DioGuardi discovering his Albanian roots when he came to Congress, and it was his first birthday party. And there were several Albanian Americans in the room. He didn't know it at the time, and they overheard his father speaking Albanian. And they were rushing up to him. We didn't know you were Albanian. And he said, well, I believe that, my father speaks, a dialect of Italian. Oh, no, you're Albanian. You're probably originally from Kosovo. Joe didn't know. His sister didn't know, his brother didn't know that his father spoke 2 languages, Italian and Albanian, the only languages he spoke when he arrived in the United States. The second pivotal development is the meeting of Joe DioGuardi and Shirley Cloyes. And it was my sister-in-law, Angel Oliveri, who's here tonight, and I might want to add, is with her husband, Tony, and my brother-in-law, Joe's brother, Dick, with his wife, Louise, and we're really, really happy to have you very much. They played a major role in our lives. Angel was the first person who said, she was astonished. She said, it's really rare to have 2 people meet in the mid-90s and fall in love out of a conviction about the Balkan wars. Most people in the United States weren't even focusing. And Joe and I did meet in that way. We were both influenced by our knowledge of the Holocaust, in my case from a very young age, at the age of 10. We both had a commitment. We knew who Slobodan Milosevic was. We knew he was a new Hitler in the heart of Europe. and we had a commitment to ending mass atrocity in our time. The third pivotal development is the foundation of the Albanian American Civic League. And that happened after Joe left Congress in 1989.